1998, a small provincial town where everyone knows each other by sight. A typical rainy autumn morning. 25-year-old Alex walks out of his house, leaving a half-finished cup of coffee on the kitchen table. He closes the door behind him, takes a step onto the street, and vanishes for the next 20 long years. For months, the police comb the nearby woods and interrogate hundreds of people. But eventually, they close the case due to a total lack of evidence. The family, having gone through all stages of despair, builds an empty grave and buries their last hope. The town's life moves on, and Alex's name is gradually erased from the neighbor's memory, remaining only as an old, yellowed missing person flyer on a precinct bulletin board. And then, 2 decades later, when almost no one remembered him anymore, someone knocks softly but persistently on the heavy oak door of his old family home. 3-second pause. What this man said next overturned everything anyone had ever known about Alex. The truth turned out to be far more terrifying and twisted than any criminal theory. 2-second pause. Let's go back to the very beginning. Who was Alex before that fateful morning in 1998? Friends and colleagues unanimously claimed that he was nothing special. Just an ordinary guy from the provinces, quiet, dutiful, with a stable but boring job in the local archives department. Those around him considered him exceptionally reliable, grounded, and balanced. He never got into fights, had no debts, and was never seen in questionable company. He had a loving family, plans for the future, and a clear, predictable life stretching to the horizon. But a few months before his mysterious disappearance, something strange began to happen to Alex. His behavior started to change ever so slightly, as if an internal, hidden countdown had begun. For no apparent reason, he started selling off his personal belongings. First, his old collection of vinyl records, then expensive books, and later, even sentimental gifts from his loved ones. When his parents asked him about it, he just shrugged it off, claiming he wanted to clear out the clutter. At the same time, Alex developed a strange, almost maniacal interest in the geography of foreign countries. He would sit for hours in the library, studying maps of South America and Eastern Europe, and endlessly question casual acquaintances about what life was like abroad, how visa regimes worked, and how difficult it was to get lost in a foreign metropolis. Once, during an evening walk, he told his closest friend a phrase that the friend remembered in detail for years to come. You know, sometimes it feels like our life is just someone else's script. And more than anything in the world, I just want to close this book, move to a place where nobody knows me, and become someone completely different. Back then, in the late 90s, these words were dismissed as mere melancholy, routine burnout, or a quarter-life crisis. Not a single person in his circle could even remotely imagine that this wasn't just random, late-night philosophy. It was a meticulously planned, cold-blooded farewell. 2-second pause. The morning Alex disappeared seemed completely ordinary. The weather was gray and foggy, typical for that time of year. Neighbors saw him step out onto the porch in his usual dark jacket. No one heard any cries for help. No one noticed any suspicious cars near the house, and there were no signs of a struggle or violence. The man simply stepped into the thick morning fog, walked to the end of the street, and seemingly dissolved into thin air. The first few days turned into a living hell for his family. At first, his parents and sister waited by the phone every single minute, thinking Alex had been kidnapped for ransom. Then they checked the mailbox for weeks, hoping to receive at least a short letter or a note with explanations. But time went on, and the only answer was a deafening, ringing silence. After 6 months, they stopped waiting altogether. The police, to their credit, launched a massive investigation. Detectives thoroughly checked all of Alex's bank accounts, but they were never touched. All his savings remained intact. They interviewed every resident within a 3-kilometer radius, checked hospitals, morgues, and train stations. Nothing. Not a single clue. Not a single witness who saw him after he turned the corner of his house. The official conclusion read, "Missing person." The case file was placed on a distant shelf in the archive, gathering dust. 3-second pause. And then, exactly 20 years later, a man returns to this very same town. He is wearing expensive but worn-out clothes, and deep exhaustion is visible in his eyes. He comes to Alex's house and confidently states his name. Without a single stutter, He recites the names of his parents, lists all the neighbors from memory, and describes the layout of the house in detail, right down to the creaking floorboard on the second floor that his father never fixed back in the 90s. But at the same time, the family was facing a man they physically could not recognize. He had a completely different, harsh foreign accent and sharp, unfamiliar manners and habits that the old Alex never possessed. But most shockingly, he carried official, legally issued documents under a completely different name, stamped by the government of a distant Latin American country. The local residents and old acquaintances froze in disbelief when they saw him on the street. The town split into two camps. No one could understand, was this really the same Alex who had pulled off a miracle and returned from oblivion? Or was it a professional fraudster, a cruel imposter who had somehow learned the intimate details of someone else's life and came to steal his place? 2-second pause. The detectives, among whom were now young officers who hadn't been around during the first disappearance, took on this tangled case anew. They began a painstaking, detailed analysis of the facts, trying to separate the truth from an artfully crafted lie. The facts that undeniably matched and spoke in favor of this being the real Alex shocked the investigators. First, there was a perfect match in age and key physical characteristics. Second, his childhood memories. He remembered details that were impossible to find in open sources or steal from old databases, such as the color of a toy car he broke when he was 5, or the secret password he and his sister made up as kids. And finally, the most compelling argument, an old scar on his wrist from a complex fracture. A medical examination confirmed that the structure of the bone callus fully corresponded to the x-rays of Alex taken in his distant childhood. But the list of things that categorically did not match terrified the police even more. How could a man live for 20 years without making a single attempt to contact his grieving mother? Where did a guy from the provinces get a completely new, absolutely clean, and legally registered identity on the other side of the world? And most importantly, there were massive, frightening logical gaps in his stories about where he had been all those years. The chronology of his new life constantly shifted, and when asked what exactly he did overseas, the man either shut down or began to contradict himself. The deeper the detectives dug, and the more forensic tests they conducted, the clearer it became. The actual truth was far more complex, terrifying, and dramatic than a simple story about a man who lost his memory and then was found. 3-second pause. The truth that came to light at the end of the investigation made many shudder. Sometimes a person's disappearance is not a tragic accident, a planned kidnapping, or a criminal trace. It is a conscious, cold decision that a person makes entirely alone with their thoughts. In the life of almost every one of us, a critical moment can come, a moment of absolute burnout, when the weight of responsibility, the gray routine, and other people's expectations begin to crush you with such force that you just want to throw it all away, erase your past, lock the door, and start from a clean slate, in a new body and under a new name. But the absolute majority of people never do this. We are held back by obligations, morality, fear, and love for our family. We continue to carry our cross. Alex took that step. He crossed the line. He faked his disappearance and, for long years, built a new life piece by piece on the other side of the planet, fighting for survival and changing masks. He got what he so passionately desired, freedom from his past. But in the end, he paid the most horrific price imaginable for this freedom, a price that can never be refunded. He permanently lost 20 years of life with those who truly, sincerely loved him. He returned to the house where he was expected, but he returned as an absolute stranger, broken and empty. His escape was successful, but did it bring him happiness? He will carry the answer to that question to his grave. 2-second pause. If you are interested in authentic, deep stories of people who once made a fatal decision and made an impossible, terrifying choice, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell icon and share your thoughts in the comments below this video. Moving forward, the content will get even harsher, deeper, and more intriguing. In our next video, you will learn the tragic and gripping story of a man who managed to build a colossal financial empire from absolute scratch, subdued an entire city, but lost absolutely everything in just one day due to a single fatal mistake. Don't miss it. See you soon.